Hello and welcome to another episode of the Self-Made Podcast. In this episode, I have the pleasure of talking to Geoff Seow, a life coach from Australia who really did reinvent his life, changing his career, changing the place that he lived and worked, and embarked on a completely new journey. Not only that, this guy has overcome many things, from addiction to drugs and alcohol, and going through burnout. In this episode, we break down, really have a deep dive into mental health. We talk about the lack of focus, the effects of social media. We discuss the Joe Rogan debates and how the cancel culture is affecting people's mental health. We also talk about how much harder it is to be a man in today's world, and how a lot of the movement for equality is, in our view, potentially more sexist than what they're trying to fight against. We delve deep into various topics in terms of toxic work environments. We talk about changing life priorities. We talk about the impact of risk and how to overcome depression and why he doesn't like the use of antidepressants. Generally, if you want to improve your mindset, if you want to improve your focus, this is a great episode with tons and tons of value for you. So without further ado, if you enjoy the show as always, please give it a share on your social medias tagging me and Geoff. Give us a review on iTunes or Spotify, whatever your favorite podcast channel is. And if you really are a long-time supporter of the show, we'd really appreciate you go on to buymeacoffee.com and give us whatever you want to help this podcast grow. But without further ado, I'll leave you with me and Geoff Seow. So Geoff, I want to say a massive, massive welcome to the show. And I think this is quite potentially a really exciting episode because for a number of reasons. I think for me, I wanted to broaden out my reach and my topics I talk about from just health, fitness, which is the underpinning of what I do, and to talk more a lot about the mindset stuff. And I feel certainly with me as I get into my early 30s that my priorities have changed and probably falling into your demographic of a millennial. I don't know where millennials started. Is it like 2000? Or are we talking, am I a millennial for being born in 1990?
Yeah, no, you are. You're a millennial, yeah.
Cool. So right me falling into your demographic, and I think this is quite an interesting topic to see some of the things that people face now as becoming young adults. So just to kind of kickstart us, tell us, for anyone who doesn't know who Geoff is, tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm a life coach for unfulfilled millennials. What I do is I really help them get really clear on their life direction by building a life vision, help them overcome self-doubt with my method. I call it the mind axis method, right? And it covers 5 different points. Covers understanding your purpose, covers building confidence, covers breaking through or limiting beliefs, setting goals, and finally, improving your mindset. So the key there is to really combine all of those to really help you go and live the life that you want. So that's what I do. I help unfulfilled people discover what they want to do and help them actually bridge the gap.
I feel this is a market that's become more and more prevalent over the course of the last decade, and more people are struggling for not knowing what they want to do. Do you think the rise in technology and the rise in social media has affected people's ability to know which path they are in their life and maybe lead them to be a bit more unfulfilled?
Yeah, absolutely, Simon. You hit it on the nail with that one. Technology has created so much confusion. We have every day hundreds of things pulling our attention in all different areas. And unless you're really clear on what you're doing and how you're going to do it, it's very easy to just repeat the same cycles because everything is pulling our attention.
Yeah, so when it comes, because you go into that with pulling our attention and focus, I think focus is something that seems to be less and less and less. And I've been, blessed in my career for the things that I focused on, I've done very, very well in. And I have to stop and check myself regularly to not get distracted, not get focused. And I've got a touch of ADHD, so this comes very, very naturally to me to be distracted and stuff. I'll watch a seminar or I watch a lecture and I'll see myself just bringing my phone to my face. So everyone's talking about multitasking these days. Is multitasking something you think can actually happen? Or is it a fallacy? Is it the fact that it actually splits our focus?
It's a complete fallacy. And the reason is because I did a lot of biohacking. I've always been obsessed with optimization, Simon. So I also am the same as you. I have a little bit of ADHD and, university was a real struggle. I'd watch 2 minutes of a lecture and before you know it, you're scrolling through your phone, right? Or you're watching a YouTube video. So over time, as I was working in my clinical research job, I learned how to optimize the way in which I focused. And the way to do that is to do one thing at once only, which means that emails, messages, texts, whatever, you create time to look at that. But if you're trying to do something, you just need to do that. So what I do now is I've biohacked my mind to build in time in my day to do certain actions. Like say, for example, if I create content, because I blast out content 3 times a week, I've got to create content. I leave aside maybe 1.5 to 2 hours every couple of days, and I just spend my time focusing so hard on that, and I knock it out, and then I get it done. And there's no distractions. And when I do, being ADHD, you can actually focus better if you know how to do it and where to put your attention.
Yeah, that's 100% true. I find myself like how the simplest of things I've done for 10 years. I know well, I understand, I can do it in my sleep. I'll find myself procrastinating, getting distracted all day. And then something will happen, it will click, and I'll be working till 4 a.m. and I can't stay away from my laptop. But for people who, whether they do or don't have ADHD, that struggle to focus, and you mentioned there a little bit about structuring your diary. How do you work with building this into someone's day? How do you minimize the distractions and start to ease that transition into moving away from their phone?
Right. So I use a system called the pillar system. Right. So I learned about this, and the pillar system is about really getting clear on what daily actions you can do every day that will actually move the needle forward towards the goal that you want to achieve. So that means reverse engineering your goal. You've got to see all the way to the end of your goal, your vision. Your goals build your vision, and you reverse engineer everything on a basis of months to weeks to days. And when you're on the day format, then you know there's like 7 to 8 things that you can do per day that are really going to form the foundation of you hitting your goals. So I look at my pillars and I know, okay, I work literally 6 days a week. I take Sundays off, but 6 days a week, I focus hard and I make sure that I hit those pillars 6 days a week. So every day I know that when I go to sleep, I've actually moved the needle forward just a little bit with what I'm trying to do. And they can be all kinds of things. They can be health related, they can be business related, whatever it is that you want, you focus on that. And then if you're talking about distractions, what I like to do is I like to build that into my day. So there's about 4 intervals I check my stuff. I check it in the morning, check it in the afternoon, check it just after I eat my meal in the evening, and I check it before I go to bed. But otherwise, I'm not looking at my phone.
Yeah, I think that's really important, especially like creating daily structures. It's something I do with my clients in terms of a health aspect. Like I work with a lot of busy CEOs, busy people, and you think they'll have their life together more than anyone else because they've managed to get an element of success in this realm of life. But when you actually meet these people are often very good, but very chaotic. They're flying by the seat of their pants, and they're just managing to get stuff done by brute force alone. And often when I work with them in terms of trying to improve their body composition, their health, it's like, right, what are the non-negotiables you need to do in your diary? What times are you going to do these? If you'll never miss a meeting because it's in your diary. But if you want to train, if you want to take care of yourself or meditate or journal, whatever you want to do for your health and mindset or anything like this, if it's not in the diary, it just doesn't get done. And that's where it becomes a distraction. But looking at that, because we have so many competing priorities these days, we're pulled in 7 different directions. You mentioned going back into finding what the few things they need to get done each day. How do you help people find out what it is that's important? Like, how do they set priorities over other things that maybe not as important?
Right. So that's basically the process of the personal transformation that I offer in my coaching programs. We get really clear at the beginning on what it is exactly that you want. And a lot of people don't have that clarity. They have a faint idea, but they don't have a real picture that they can build towards, right? You've got to really get so clear on what that is. Then you've got to understand, okay, what's holding you back today from actually creating that? Like, what's holding you back from taking the steps? We get really clear on fears, limiting beliefs. These things are huge, Simon. Like, literally, people know what they want to do. They just don't do it. Why? Because of internal fears that are not resolved. We're going to help you get past that. After that, once we're past the goals, once we're past the vision, we're past overcoming the fears, and we have it all out and laid out on the table, we start building out the goals, right? Actually giving a strategy. But the key is, because we have to reverse engineer everything, we've got to get clear in that vision and work our way backwards. So I take my clients through a whole process of reverse engineering, from years to weeks to days to months. Literally, I know I said that in the wrong order, but like, we get it to like the smallest component possible. And then we find out how they can book that in with themselves on a daily basis to make sure it gets done. And the most important thing, deadlines. It's actually setting a promise to yourself, putting your own word on the line. Your word is bond. I mean, if you wouldn't break a promise to someone else, why would you break a promise to yourself? You get to live in your own body. So when people are clear on that, it's easier to actually action it, because you respect yourself. You know that there's nothing holding you back but you. And if you follow these steps, you will achieve a vision.
I think deadlines are something that's really, really important, because we all tend to put things off. Like, as you said, it's easier to break a promise to yourself. And with my clients in a body composition realm, things like photo shoots, things like holidays, things like weddings are very easy, like things to have in the diary to make today valuable. Obviously, with improving your health and your mindset, there's no real concrete deadline. There's no like work deadline. There's no wedding or holiday or photo shoot. So what are the deadlines you kind of put in place for your clients that sort of help them keep that focus?
Well, it depends on the goal. Like, for example, if it was a career goal, if it was a learning goal, then they can have deadlines. With health and fitness, that's a little bit different. And I mean, like, I'm not a personal trainer. And for me, I don't think, well, personally, this is the way I look at it. I don't think health should be defined by how much the weighing scale says. I think it should be defined based on your measurements and based on your overall fitness. So, like, for example, if you can't run 5 kilometers, which like is a basic level of health, like any human being should be able to run 5 kilometers without stopping. Like, that's basic, right? And if you can't do that, you've got to really think, okay, maybe that can be your goal. If you run every day with consistency, when you can do that, there doesn't have to be a definable timeline, but being able to do that with consistency, that should be your goal. Because if you do something with consistency, you're going to achieve it regardless. If you run every day, you're going to be able to run marathons. It's just a no-brainer. But the key is building in that consistency, and that itself is the goal. So make sure you can tick that off maybe 4 to 5 times a week.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think like the number on the scale, I think, is something that so it gets a lot of hate, and like because people see the negative connotations of, they get an emotional reaction to the number on the scale. And I think certainly when I work with people in terms of body composition goal, I don't think throwing out the scale entirely is the right way forward, because I think there's a lot of people, they need those short-term wins to kind of build momentum. When you build momentum, you get yourself in the right place. But it's learning through maybe taking it more. I think the freedom from the body weight scale is by taking it more frequently, not less. A lot of people think too much about the number on the scale. We should stop weighing them. Whereas now, if you do it once a week, you could have had a big meal last night. You had a bad night's sleep. You could be stressed. That could affect what the scale weighs in this morning. And because you have no reference point of why that scale number's gone up, because you only took it 3-4 months ago, you have no idea. And when it comes to, if you took it daily, you can start to see trends. You can start to see averages. And if you're a woman, my weight goes up 1 week every 4. I know that if I go out and have a few drinks, this happens to my weight. And you can start to sort of separate it from, oh, that must mean I've gotten fatter. In reality, that means I still need to go and have a big old dump in the toilet today. This means that I need to have some, I had some extra food today. And obviously when I work with people, I start with that very, very, in a way, scale focus, but it's like using that as a daily way of building small goals. Next week, I want you to be a % of your body weight down, and again and again and again. And when you hit that target, it's not about weight anymore. It's about how you look when you got to the end goal, and then shifting your mindset away from your weights and into that, so into something else, into performance, into whatever your sort of second goal is. So delving a little bit into your story, one of the things you mentioned when you transitioned into the line of work that you do now is experiencing burnout. And like, tell us a little bit about that. Tell us what the true symptoms of burnout actually are, because do you think it's a term that is overused? Because everyone talks about burnout, but I've experienced true burnout. I think it's very different to just feeling a bit run down.
Absolutely agree. True burnout is awful. And I've been there before once in my life. It's literally like, I guess the best way to do it would be to describe a picture of it and tell you how that really affected the way I did stuff. So I used to work in clinical research, and I remember I used to show up to work and I used to just hate every second of it. I used to hate waking up, hate getting on the train. Like, it used to take me an hour to get there. I hated the whole process. I'd go to my office. The bright part of my day was saying hello to my colleagues. I love working with them. I'd sit at my desk, try and respond to some emails, and I would just sit there and slump in my chair and look at the ceiling. And I'd do this for an hour. And I still remember some of my friends that I work with, they were like, Geoff, are you okay? And I'm just like, I literally have no energy and no desire to do anything or even to be here. I was so miserable. I hated it. I could not do anything. And in this period in time, it was actually just after I had become sober, actually. So maybe that might have been some correlation. But I had no desire to do anything. I felt flat. I wasn't working out. And I just felt awful, man. And true burnout is when this affects not just your work life, but your whole life. So when you go home, you don't want to work out. When you go home, you just lie down in your bed and just look at the ceiling. Like you have no desire to do anything productive as normal, healthy humans do. Humans' innate nature is to be productive and create, right? That's what we are. That's what we do. It's built into us. But when we're feeling burnout, we can't do that. Can't hang out with our friends. We just don't want to even be present anymore. We just need deep rest, the deepest kind that sleep cannot provide. And I'm not talking about suicide, but I'm talking about just like a break, man. Like just a break where we figure out and recalibrate. And I never had that, so I just kind of tolerated it. But then what really brought me on track was fitness. Going to the gym, and I started gymming every single day religiously. It changed my life. It gave me a purpose again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so important. And one of the things that I massively have in my content, certainly these days, after experiencing burnout myself, is that yes, you come to, in my case, made coaching with the goal of I want to look a certain way. I want bigger biceps. I want six-pack abs. I want all this sort of stuff. And as awesome as that is, when you get to the end of that goal, it's not the abs that made someone happy. It's the processes that it took to get there. It's the self-discipline. It's the delayed gratification. It's seeing a goal through to completion. It's how your confidence changed. And I always talk about a story about a client of mine that was called Winston, who he was coming back in remission from pancreatic cancer, really out of shape, a lot of fast food. Hong Kong people don't cook. And for, in the early stages of his prep, he was chaotic. He didn't really have any structure to his day. And he mentioned, I found him on Instagram, and there wasn't a single photo of him on his Instagram. It was a whole picture of his wife, even the profile picture. And if you found that page, you would have gone, wow, she's got a weird name. And it's because he didn't like taking photos of himself. And as he got leaner, he started sending me gym selfies. And I'm like, okay, we're on to something here. And then I floated the idea of like, how do you want to do a photo shoot? And he was originally, nah, that's not me. And eventually he said, yes, he'd do it. And I thought, this story of this guy that didn't want to take a photo of himself in private, now booking time with the photographer to take the photo shoot. It's not about the pictures. It's about the story that picture tells. And a week before the shoots, the gyms closed here in Hong Kong due to COVID. I was like, well, what are we going to do now? And then we ended up deciding to do the shoot in Tamar Park, in the front, on the big harbour of Hong Kong. And we got a guy who wouldn't take a photo of himself in private to going out with his shirt off in the most densely populated city in the world. And that shows how much the physical really can be a vehicle to transform. And going back onto understanding the symptoms of burnout, what do you think the trigger is for burnout? I mean, I've got a story about this, but it'd be interesting to hear you all. How did you get to this place where you just felt like you didn't want to do anything, you needed a rest?
Right. I think there are a few components. The first component, Simon, would be how you invest your personal resources. So, for example, all humans come with three resources, and these are material and non-material. It's time, energy, and financial resources, right? And depending on how you invest these in your life, you can reach burnout very quickly. So, for example, if you have no time and you have no energy, but you have lots of money, burnout's knocking on your door, right? That's just an example. So if you're not investing your time probably to actually care for yourself, and as we're talking about here, as in your client Winston, like when he started putting himself out there and it felt really good, if you're training and you're putting in the work and you're getting healthy behind the scenes, that's giving you more energy to actually do more. Training actually gives you more energy. You build more mitochondria. It's literally shown, right? So that's a big one there. So that's literally like how burnout begins. And burnout extends when it comes to unfulfillment. When it's not just looking beyond your resources, but when what you do, what's on the inside, your vision for what you want your life to look. I'm not talking about sitting on the beach sipping a coconut. That's everyone's generic dream. But if you look beyond that, there's another dream. And that dream is closely correlated to human impact. How are you going to do something positive for the world, right? And when you start to reach that and you start to actually realize how far it is where you are now to where you could be and your potential, that builds burnout because the day becomes unbearable. And people that find they're unbearable because they can actually see a better future but have no idea how to reach it, that's where I come in to help. And I love being there to help that because I love taking people through the process that I've been through. Yeah. Right. So that's another big way that burnout begins. Just two things: investing your energy and your resources and not being fulfilled with what you do with your life.
And it's like a domino effect as well, right? One leads to the other. Like I know for me, like mine was a lot of very unfulfillment things. It's feeling, I know where I wanted to be. I knew, in a way, some ways how to get there. I didn't have the complete picture, but I felt trapped and not able to make that first step. And the big thing for me was getting actually pushed out of my current circumstances helped me go, right, well, I've got to make this work now. But I don't know if I never had that push, whether I would have been able to start to climb out of that hole. How much do you feel there's an impact on other people in terms of, can other people accelerate burnout? Because I know for me in my story, my path towards burnout was very much based around a very, very, very toxic employer. And the gaslighting and the bullying and the mental abuse from that place left me a real hole. And in a way, changed my outlook on something that I'd loved through the whole of my 20s. And then being burnt out on something you've invested so much time into is really, really tricky. Like, how much do you feel that your environment and the people around you can accelerate this process of burnout? What can you do about that?
It has a huge impact. The people you spend the most time around, especially, as adults, is your work colleagues, right? And if you don't like your work colleagues, and especially in your particular case, where there was bullying, gaslighting, man, that's horrible. That just feels like school again. It should never be the case. Never, ever. I was very lucky that I never had that. Working in clinical research, I actually enjoyed working with people I worked with. They were amazing. I'm still keeping in touch with some of them today.
Yeah.
But for me, it didn't have, but I know that the people you work with can have a direct influence. If you're very externally driven, there's different types of people, right? So for me, I've always kind of been very internally driven. So things happen on the outside, but I'm not really too fazed by it. It's kind of just like if someone says something, I'm like, okay, whatever. It doesn't really bother me too much. But if you are impacted by other people's words, like it depends on your mindset there too, then for sure it can have a big impact on your life. But for me, that's not been the case because I'm kind of just like internally, I have that resilience to not really be too worried about what people say or do. And for me, that just keeps me calm and in control.
It's interesting you speak about, because I really like my work colleagues, but it was the management system that was a real issue with me. And I think it's interesting you brought up earlier on about those sort of three pillars, and like financial, energy, and taking care of yourself. And I generally find that in that situation, that financial pillar was such a thing that kind of pulled me into that position, because I'm generally like you, very internally focused. But because that financial pillar wasn't in the right place, I couldn't have turned around to my employer and go, "Fuck you, I'm out the door. I'm not taking this." It allowed me to stay in that environment that wasn't serving me, because I didn't have the confidence maybe in myself because of the financial hole. I couldn't just take time off and work out what I wanted to do, and that I want to kind of bring that onto sort of the topic of taking risks, because I think a lot of people are going to be coming into this in a similar position to myself if they're working with you, in terms of maybe not liking their work, whether it's directly like me, the people they work for, or whether it's I want to change careers, I want to do a new job, I don't like my current job itself. And when we talk about risk, everybody talks about the offset of making a risk. Like, if I take a risk, these are the pros and cons of taking the risk. But no one actually talks about the impact of not making a risk, not taking a risk, and not taking the decision to have. And I think this is something that needs to be talked about, because I know from my position, every time that I wanted to leave my previous employer, and every time I decided not to, for whatever reason, like I don't feel I can get enough clients in, I don't feel I'm financially stable, I don't know the perfect route, it was me saying to myself that I deserve the way I'm treated. They're treating me like this, and I am taking it. And I remember vividly, I listened to a podcast I was on, which I got in trouble for with my previous employer because they don't like people being individuals. And I was so confident in myself. And then 6 months later, I did another one just before I left. And I just looked at myself as a shell of the man I was in that 6 months. And all that happened, all that changed in my day was I didn't take the leap. So like when you got clients that maybe are looking at maybe big calculated risks, like what's your thought on what I said first? And how do you help people understand whether a risk is worth taking? And how do you make them leap?
Right. So I definitely agree with what you're saying on risk there. Like over time, if your mental state really defines whether you're ready to take a risk, right? So you can look at the facts and the figures, and you can look at all the different biases. But if your mindset is not in the state of abundance, where you actually have self-belief, that is the number one key factor to taking any risk. If you don't believe in yourself, don't take the risk. Seriously, don't. Because you could have all of the facts and the figures and the motivator, but if you don't believe in yourself, you will sabotage yourself over and over and over again. I've seen this so many times. I did it myself too. Back when I was working in clinical research, I used to basically tell myself every day, I have no choice. I must do this. And that became the story of me. I have no choice. This is my life. Until I decided, no, I have a choice. I will change my life. And it all starts within. There's a seed you've got to plant in your mind. You have to develop that self-confidence and that belief, right? So basically, when I help my clients, we get really clear on what it is that they would actually want. If they're not happy where they are, then there's a reason for it. You've got to understand what's making you not happy. What makes people unhappy? When they can see a better version of life, and that's not their life right now, right? I always like to say, what would your ideal week be like? What would your ideal day be like? What is it you really want to do with your life? Because when you get clear on that, then you can start to realize that the steps between you and where you want to be maybe aren't that many. And then the moment that you start to understand that there is a plan and there's actions and there's methods and habits and things you can build in every day, and if you consistently execute, it starts to build up self-belief. Self-belief is not something that you just tell yourself, oh, I believe in myself. No, it doesn't work that way, right? It only did. Self-belief only comes when you're working, when you're committed, and you show up every day and you start to see results, but you're not driven by the results. You're driven by the journey of what you're going to learn and how you're going to improve. That's when you really start to believe in yourself. And I've seen this change in many of my clients. And honestly, man, it makes me so happy because why? That change happened for me. When I see it for others, like I feel on top of the world. I'm like, man, I feel so good that you feel so good. It's amazing to watch. And I'm sure you know that feeling too as a coach. Nothing feels better.
Yeah, 100%. I feel that like it's interesting you were saying that the thing that inspires confidence is taking action, because action dictates mood. I generally believe that. How many times going into using it as my realm as an example, how many times do you go, I don't want to go out and do my cardio. I don't want to go and do a training session a day. You go, and I always say to my clients, go and do one set. If you go and do one set and then you still go, I hate this, I don't want to do it, go home. You have my permission. But 9 times out of 10, when you've done that one set, you're there, you've already got your gear on, you've got to the gym, you've started, you're into it then, and you start getting into it. And you always end up in a better mood by the end of this thing. And it's the more those positive actions you take, the more confidence you begin to build. So like what you mentioned, you were in this state where you didn't have that self-belief. You felt that you needed to be in this work environment. What was the catalyst for you? What changed from there to I'm leaving and embarking on a brand new career?
Well, it was definitely simultaneous to these feelings, that these manifestations of how unhappy I was in my life, was the fact that I had been doing drugs for a long point at that time. I've been doing drugs for about 8 to 9 years, and I was smoking and partying heavily. And it was really underpinning the unsatisfaction I felt on my personal level, which led to my professional life. And all around, I was the saddest man to be around. If you had known me 2 years ago, I would have been the most negative Nancy you'd ever met, right? Literally. What really changed was within, when I began to realize that I can do more with my life. And what really changed was I discovered a book. Okay. Like I had bought a life coaching course years ago, and I started to do this at this period in time because I wanted to improve my life. I didn't intend to be a life coach. I just wanted to improve my life. But I came across a book that I had also bought when I was 20 years old. And I came across this book. It was in my bookshelf for 4 years. I was reading this at 24 years old. And it's called The 50th Law by 50 Cent and Robert Greene, right? Robert Greene, amazing author. I don't know if you know of him. He's so good. Yep. And I read this book, and it talks about how 50 Cent literally achieved everything in his life and never does drugs, doesn't even drink alcohol. When he's in the club, he fills up his bottles with water just to make it look like he's drinking alcohol, but he doesn't. He stays sober. And it made me realize that for me to achieve my dreams, there was a clear problem. I knew that I wanted to do something better with my life. I didn't know what yet at that time, but I also knew that the reason I didn't know was because I was continuously blasting my mind, trying to forget about how miserable I was. So it was a continuous loop. So I was like, okay, something has to stop the loop. And I knew that regardless of every vision and everything that I might achieve later on, I needed to focus on getting sober. It took me about 6 months to quit doing drugs, to quit drinking, to quit smoking, and start putting in positive habits. But that was the very beginning of it all. And the seed was that book, because never before that point did I realize that sobriety can change your life. It never even occurred to me, because everyone I was surrounded by was living the same bad habits that I was.
Mm. With when it comes to that, obviously you mentioned it wasn't just alcohol. There was various drugs and things like this. Like, How did you start that 6 months? Because that must seem like an overwhelming thing if there's a cocktail of things that you feel like you need to change. Like we see it all the time when people start New Year's resolutions. I'm going to quit smoking, I'm going to go for a run every morning, I'm going to do 50,000 steps, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to journal. I'm like, stop. What's the first thing? Like, how did you approach such a big task and achieve it in 6 months?
Well, I had this page that I built on Instagram, right? And I built this page in actually on Christmas Day of 2 years ago, right? So not last year, the year before I built it. No, I think even the year before that. But anyways, I had it for a long time, and I was it's called Your Daily Purpose. It still exists. I post sometimes, but I created that page as a seed of self-belief, right? Before that point, I didn't believe that I could achieve anything in my life, but I just wanted to share my intentions with the world. So I started creating content, and then that page became my accountability. It became especially when I was struggling to go from being sober, from being an addict to being sober. I made the stupid mistake that you mentioned just then. I tried to quit drinking, smoking cigarettes, and doing drugs all at once, and it was fucked. It was so bad. So I was like, okay, I can't do it this way. So I focused on just quitting drugs first. That took a while, but I stopped that. And then once I did that, I got an earring in my ear to make sure that I never do it again. Every time I look in the mirror, I remember, okay, this earring is to never ever do drugs again. Number one. Number two, I was like, okay, I need to quit smoking next. So it took me about 6 months to do that. And then I tried to quit smoking, and it took me another 6 months. When I did that, I got another earring in my ear, right? Never go back to smoking cigarettes again. And then I decided to quit drinking. And when I moved to Melbourne, which was the middle of last year, I have not touched alcohol. I just don't drink it because I spent about 10 weeks in isolation because it was in lockdown the whole time. Yeah. Didn't drink alcohol. I just worked on my coaching, and I got a tattoo to remind myself to never drink alcohol again. So for me, I leave literal body manifestations on me to show that I can't go back. How can I? Because if I do, it goes against everything that literally exists on me, right? So I can never go back to the model which I was.
That's interesting. It's interesting talking about in a way of burning bridges, because it kind of makes them with the risk thing, right? Like so many people don't want to burn bridges. They're worried about failing. And the fact that you've now put something into yourself now that's like, right, no, I'm going to hold myself accountable to the person I am today. And you find if you don't give yourself the option to go back, the only way is going forward. Like, how many of your clients struggle with the fear of failure when it comes to risk taking, when it comes to embarking on change? How many people are like a slave to what their certain situations are, whether it's something they want to change in life or drugs or alcohol or something like this? How do we get over that?
Pretty much every client I've ever had has had a fear of something, a fear of failure, a fear of judgment, a fear of the unknown, a fear of success, man. It's so common, and these fears are illusions because they don't exist. How can you be afraid of anything apart from obvious survival fears? Everything else is made up based on past experiences. So here's what I do. I know the process to get past it. I studied this, I implemented it, I've done it in my life, and I've helped many clients. We got to find the root. We got to find the seed. Where does your fear come from? Let's say, for example, you have a fear of judgment. You're afraid of other people's words. Where does that come from? We dig deep into the past, deep into their lives, and we understand, okay, what is your first memory of actually feeling this fear? Because only when you isolate that memory and the feeling associated with it, can you actually begin to realize how ridiculous it is. Let's say, imagine you're in school and you got made fun of for being fat, right? And then say you carry that 10 years in the future. It would make no sense because no one's going to do that to you anymore. No one's going to say that. It's irrelevant. But that emotion is tied. And it comes down to neuroscience, Simon. I studied into this as well. So it comes down to neuroscience. We attach emotions to neurons. So memory links, we actually attach neurotoxins to them, right? To memory links, which basically create negative emotions in our amygdala. Our amygdala regulates how we feel. So when we process certain events that are similar to that memory link, we exhibit that neurotoxin, which makes us feel a certain way, which creates that fear. So the key is getting clear on that. And what that does is it removes a neurotoxin because now you're aware. Awareness removes that, that Neuralink effect.
That's really interesting. I remember going a number of years ago, I went to an event called the Waking Up Weekend. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it was an event that actually was one of the initial inspirations for Tony Robbins and what he does. So they do some in the UK, they do some in America. And it's basically a 2-day weekend where they'll teach you about the brain and your processes and things like this, but they'll also blend these in with activities that start with meeting someone you've never met before and holding eye contact, to escalate to what you do on the Sunday, which I'm not going to give away on the podcast, because if anybody goes and does it, if I told you what happened on the Sunday, there's no way you'd be walking in the door. And I remember vividly, they were like, I'm not going to tell you what happens because you just need to go and experience it. But one of the things they talk about is the brain's process. Like, everyone has a process. That process in your brain is made up of all the past experiences you've had that create you to believe or have the actions that you take. The only way to change that process, though, is like a two-way arrow, is by changing the actions. Now, how is that possible when the brain is telling you to act in a certain way based on this? And a lot of that is down to reframing, and reframing the situation. Like you said there with that childhood trauma, reframing is like, this isn't a thing anymore. And allowing people to start taking actions that over time build momentum and start to change that process. And the best example from my life that I vividly remember that worked was when I was like late teens, early 20s, terrible at talking to women in bars, terrible at it. I was very much put the girl across the bar on a pedestal. Whoa, she's 10 out of 10. She won't like me. I've got crap teeth and all that. I'm not going to do it. And then I remember listening to a dating coach called Johnny Cassell, who talked about a girl can only be 5 out of 10 on looks alone. The other 5 is made up of who they are, their personality, that kind of thing. And that piece of advice, I don't know why it stuck in my head, but it transformed a lot in me, because it was like, right, I was a girl that before I go, oh my God, it's 10 out of 10. I can't talk to her. And I'm sitting there shifty and I move away. Now it's like, okay, she's 5. Let's go and see if she makes up the other 5. It changed it to excitement. And while it was still scary, it was less overwhelming. And in turn, when I did, I spoke to more people and eventually got more and more success. And as the successes increased and the rejections decreased, as I got more confident, eventually that process sort of changed and started reframing how I looked at the whole process in the first place. So, like, going back into the sort of getting sober, because it seems to be a fad topic of today. My YouTube is full of, and I'm not someone that's looking to get sober, but my YouTube algorithm is filled with people. I quit alcohol and this is what it did to my life. And a lot of these people I know only drank like a couple of glasses of wine a week. So, like, what was your relationship before with alcohol? And what impact has it truly had on your life now you've stopped?
The frequency of which I used to drink alcohol was pretty much every weekend and during the week. I started drinking when I was 17 because I had a very strange rebellious streak. Ever since I've been as young as I can remember, I've always had trouble with following the grain. I've always wanted to do something that was different, right? I mean, so when I was 17, I started drinking in private, and then I started going out and drinking every weekend. And I'm not talking like 1 or 2 drinks. I mean, like, literally, because I'm a big dude, right? I've always been like fairly big size. And like, so alcohol doesn't have a massive like effect on me if I have like 2 or 3. I need to have like more than 10 to like actually feel something good, right? So I need to drink a lot. So I used to blast myself with alcohol. But alcohol, to me, the one thing I noticed is that it brought out a characteristic that I've always never liked. I've always been conscious of myself. I've never been blackout drunk. I've never been like really like, just like so out of it. But it brings out a certain side of me that I really don't like. And that person is narcissistic, arrogant, all the traits of which I don't really perceive in myself when I'm in a sober state. When I drink alcohol, it brings it out. I just become a bit of a menace, and I hate that. I always hated that. But I kept drinking because it was a societal norm. Whenever I hang out with my friends or go out, I don't go out partying anymore. I just don't do it because I don't want to drink alcohol. It doesn't hold any benefit for me. But how did it change my life? When I stopped drinking alcohol, it really created a lot more time for me, one, to work on my goals and my vision, because I don't go out and party and get drunk. I don't really do that stuff anymore. And
it feels terrible on a Sunday. Like, that's having that Sunday back is so important, because I felt I never rested when I go out on a Saturday. Like, I go into work on a Monday already tired. Because if I had that day off, we talk about energy being part of burnout. How much longer could you go without hitting that wall if you allowed yourself to truly rest on a weekend?
Oh, wow. Probably a lot longer. A lot longer. Because the weekend's an important time, especially Sunday. It's not the best day of the week, for sure. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, so sorry, I cut you off in your story there, but I just thought it's important parts to go ahead with. So carry on what you were saying about the effect it had on you when you finished.
Yeah, right. So now that I don't drink alcohol anymore, it gives me more time.
Hmm.
And also I feel better. Alcohol is also a major depressant the day after, like on Sunday, that hangover. It's because you flooded your whole brain with dopamine and serotonin. So basically, you're just feeling terrible and hungover, and then you're just unproductive.
Hmm.
So for me, not drinking alcohol, my body just feels good and clean all the time.
Yeah.
And also, it has bad effects as well in the long term. Alcohol gives you cancer in the long term. Alcohol destroys your liver, gives you fatty liver. It destroys your kidneys. Why would I want that? I want to live a good, healthy life.
Hmm. Agreed, agreed. So going into a little bit, one of the big things I resonated with in terms of looking through your website and what you do is you really did take it. We spoke about this briefly in the risk section, but you took a leap into the unknown. You changed career, you changed place, you moved across to Melbourne. I know now you're back. But like, what was the impact of moving away to somewhere brand new had on your life? And sort of like in terms of like reinventing yourself, how was that process of like going from one job and completely starting a new career, later on in life? Because a lot of people, I feel, they tend to find it difficult to reinvent themselves because they've invested so much time into something. They stay doing it, not because they actually feel that that fulfills them anymore, but because they feel like they don't want to give up the investment they've already put into something. So from your perspective, obviously going through a number of years doing what you did to completely changing that, how did that happen for you?
Well, I had to really cut my ego. I had to really get clear on who I was to begin with. See, I'd always been a bit of an entrepreneur. I've always enjoyed business. I had a big business a couple of years ago as well when I think I was 21 at the time. So when I got into this role, I got into it because I thought I was creating security and comfort in a nice, cushy office job. I didn't. I hated it. It just made me so unhappy. So taking the leap of faith and going to Melbourne was very important. I quit my job and I was in Melbourne 3 weeks later. I just packed up and just said, see you later. And I just flew over there. I didn't know anyone in Melbourne. I organized a place to stay by calling this guy on Facebook. And I was like, hey, man, can I stay in your home? He was on like Flatmates, which is an app we have. And I called him on Facebook, say, hey, can I? And that's it. It was a 3-minute chat. And then luckily he pulled through. So I had a place to stay. Right. So I didn't know anyone, didn't know how to do anything at all. Right. Because I'm still pretty young. I'm only 26. I did this when I was 25. So I always have been moving and shifting. And for me, staying in a job for a long period of time is very unappealing. I always love shifting and doing different things. So to me, taking the leap of faith was difficult. It was actually very, very scary. But when I did it and I overcame it and I actually made something of it, because I actually started to focus so hard on growing my coaching business, developing, basically establishing myself in Melbourne, trying to build new social communities. It was a bit hard in lockdown, but I was trying. But yeah, it really, really changed the game because it had made me shift from an employee mindset to an entrepreneur's mindset. Because now there was no going back. Like literally, there was no going back. Like because in Melbourne, no one was hiring. There were no jobs. Like it was in lockdown. There's literally no going back. It's either you sink or you swim. I chose to swim.
Hmm. Do you think that's an important thing when people are looking at changing careers or becoming entrepreneurs? Because it's becoming more popular now. People that not just employers want to back themselves, but a lot of people get caught in trying to make this their side hustle. And while that could be very, very good, it does mean you always have that safety net. And that could shift your focus. We talked about multitasking earlier on being a bit of a fallacy. Like, do you feel that it's an important part of being a success in business to take a leap and go all in?
No, not necessarily. It depends on the person. It depends how driven you are. Like, for example, if you're a 40-year-old, you're building a side hustle to make more money for your family, your kids, that's your motivation, right? I don't have any children. I don't have a partner. So for me, doing this is completely fine. But if you have a family and you got a house and you got a mortgage, don't quit your job. Build your side hustle, make that your real thing, and then quit your job. But risk has to be managed. If you're like myself, and I can go anywhere in the world, I'm not tied to anything, then risk is fine. But if you've got kids, you got to look after them first. That's the number one. So risk has to be managed.
Yeah, I do agree with what you're saying about the moving to a new place is so important. I've been in Hong Kong now 2.5 years, and just in time, not you, just in time for, in our case, protests and COVID. But so we never really got to explore Asia like we'd like. But it really does take you out of your comfort zone, and it does make you realise, in a way, that a lot of the things you're scared of in terms of taking risks aren't actually as big a deal as they seem in your head. Like I've come to Hong Kong. Didn't know anybody at all. I've made it work. I found a way of living here. I've got booted out of a job, start my own thing, found another career, find another gym to work for, and I did that much quicker than I thought I would. And I think if I hadn't have taken the move across the world, maybe I wouldn't have had that confidence to go, right, cool, I can pick myself up, I can go. And I think that's such an important thing to be able to do. And you're back in Perth now, right?
Yeah, I'm back in Perth now. I had to escape the lockdown. It was yeah.
Are you still locked down there?
Not anymore, but Melbourne was locked down for like 5 months. It was insane. So I just didn't want to stay there anymore. I did want to stay there, but I didn't want to stay in that lockdown because trust me, like lockdown is just, it's not great.
What is your thoughts from someone who works with people in the mental health? What are your thoughts on lockdowns in general? With COVID, you know, some people obviously think it's terrible and we do everything we can to solve it, and then we get the people with their tinfoil hats on the other side that don't think it's that bad at all, and most of us are in the middle. And where's your take on the impact of lockdowns? Were they worth it for what this thing actually is? And what do you think? What have you seen with your clients at the impact with people since people have been locked down more?
I think that lockdowns were worth it at the very beginning of the pandemic when there was only minor spread and they were trying to snuff it out. That completely failed, as they've shown. And when it completely failed, they should have realized that this is not an effective way of literally containing the spread of COVID. You can't. Because after the first couple of lockdowns, people just go and do what they want anyways, right? So you can't control that. But in terms of mental health, lockdowns have been huge. They had a massive effect on me too. I spent so much time on lockdown, and the people I've worked with and the people in Melbourne, it gets really bad. Why? Because lockdowns removed the one thing that humans need most. Humans need to have autonomy. We need to have autonomy, and we need to have connection to other human beings. If you take that away and you remove that and you're telling people, oh, you can't go near each other, you can't see family, you got to wear a mask, you can't go into this public place, you have to be 2 meters apart and there's people checking on you and it's a law. Well, that's literally the opposite of humanity. Like humanity is meant to mingle, it's meant to be autonomous, it's meant to do what it wants. We are a free living organism, right? That's literally the whole premise of like nature, humanity, and lockdowns are the opposite of that. It's taking away our sense of being human. So in my clients, I've seen, unfortunately, a lot of people have reached some breaking points with lockdown. And fortunately, I guess the flip side of that is that they seek help. And when you seek help, you can make something out of it. But if you're still in lockdown, then it's a very rough situation.
Yeah, I would say we're in it now. And I generally think when we didn't understand the severity of this virus, when it first came out, I understand the logic of lockdown. Like we didn't know how bad it was going to be. It could have been absolutely terrible. And as this has gone on 2-3 years down the line, we're realizing this probably isn't as, I don't want to put light on anyone that's had a real bad effects of this, but on the whole, on a global scale, probably wasn't as bad as we first initially feared. And looking at lockdowns now, it's like, if you want something that's going to trash your immune system, keep them indoors, tell them to wash their hands several times a day, tell them to wear masks, tell them to have stress and mad panic and things like this. You know, I think I think we'll look back on this in 10, 15 years as one of the biggest blunders in global history in terms of how we've dealt with it and the knock-on effects of it. Like the rates of suicide have gone up through the roof. Male suicide in particular has gone up through the roof since lockdown started. And I think that's an amalgamation of, you know, lockdowns and the things you mentioned and a little bit like the way the world's going with the mainstream media. And I think it's be interesting to get your take on this because it's topical at the moment of cancel culture, woke left, and obviously in the news at the moment with Joe Rogan, which I feel very strongly about. But before I go into my views on that, what is your take on this now about how we are moving to censor more and more people? Do you think this is a good thing? Do you have a knock-on effect on people's mental health? As a, you know, and with the media in general, let's talk about the news as well and how honest they may or may not be.
I love that you brought this up because I feel very strongly about it too. You know, and I think that cancel culture is the worst thing that has come out of the last 10 years. Since when is free speech not viable? Since when can you not have an opinion? Because now if you have an opinion somehow, if you're not agreeing with a certain party or if you're impartial, then, well, you don't belong to either party and you deserve to be cancelled. Joe Rogan, right? This Joe Rogan thing, people are like, okay, Joe Rogan said some derogatory terms in the past, right? So like, how can you bring that up and say, okay, he's going to keep doing this and it should tarnish his image? He's apologized for it. I get it. And even people like David Goggins, who is also, an African American, to say, I understand it was wrong, but this was in the past and we're still friends. He supported him, right? So, like right now, cancel culture is all about deleting things that aren't suiting an agenda. And what is the agenda? To morph the human mind to literally view things based on where you can make the most money, right? Where you can make the most money.
100%. I think if you the big thing you realize, like, I'm not necessarily condoning Joe Rogan's use of the N word, but the timing of that report was so suspicious in that, right, we tried to get misinformation because of 2 or 3 people that got on the show, ignoring the fact that he got the CNN guy on a month prior. And so he maybe does favor one side of the argument, but he's a podcaster. He's not a news broadcaster. He has his people he wants to talk to on his show. And maybe you could have split them more fairly. But it was just after that he realized, we can't get him on that. Let's throw a racist thing in there. And it was so soundbite heavy. And I remember putting my views on the Joe Rogan debate on social media. And I got a message from someone who really was anti Joe Rogan. And he comes at me with something. I come back with my response and my thoughts on it. And he ended his reply with, to be fair, I've not watched a whole episode of Joe Rogan because I felt halfway through I wanted to pull my eyelashes out. I'm like, this is the problem. We're now in this world where, I don't know if it's instant gratification or whatever else, and we can surround our whole life with things that fit our opinions of the world and confirmation bias. And I go on YouTube, I find videos I like. I want to go on podcasting, I find the podcasts that suit in my opinion. That if someone disagrees with the way you think, or you don't like someone, you can go and attack them without any prior understanding and knowledge. If the news did that, and we can move on to that in a second, but if the news outright did that and outright lied and didn't actually take context it'd be illegal. But people can do this now, having never watched an episode of Joe Rogan. I'm like, if you watch 20 episodes and you can then tell me a genuine argument why you dislike it, then I will listen. But right now, people are hearing sound bites, and there's the 90% of arguments, in my opinion, the answer is in the middle. And we are very, very worryingly going down a path where, as you said, things have to happen at the extremes, and you're not allowed to have debates anymore. If you debate somebody's opinion, you're now wrong, or it's fake news, or it's misinformation. And if you look at research, you can come up with different scientific conclusions from the same research. So there is right and wrong, but like it's nuanced, it's grey in a lot of areas. And when we ignore that and we discourage debate, I find that it creates less trust in the public, and it creates a world where people actually don't know the truth even more.
Absolutely. Because, debating is the nature of human intelligence. Like, if you look back into ancient history, if you look at the Greeks, you look at the Romans, they used to hold debates for fun, because debating is very different from arguing. Arguing is where you're just trying to convince someone else. Debating is where you're trying to learn about their point of view, but you're also trying to teach them yours. Debating is an intellectual thing. And nowadays, debating is frowned upon because why? Information is condensed. As you're saying, you listen to a soundbite and you're like, oh, I know everything about Joe Rogan. Well, no, you don't. Because now information in the past required a whole synthesis, right? You would go to university, you'd go through tomes to actually learn how to master a skill. These days, you can watch a YouTube video and all of a sudden you're an expert, right? You've literally cut out the time, the energy, and the brain synthesis required to compound knowledge. And I'm very passionate about this. I'm glad you're talking about this, man, because compounding knowledge to me is the most important thing. To learn anything requires a level of mastery. And everyone thinks they're a master now. Everyone has a get-rich-quick scheme. Everything is so quick and fast, and it's an illusion. It's an illusion to trick us into thinking that everything needs to be easy. It's not. Life is not intended to be simple. Life is intended to be a journey. And the moment that's how you begin to enjoy it, by realizing that everything is long-term. If you want to transform your body, that's a long-term game. If you want to learn something new, that's a long-term game. It's not overnight. And now we're being told a narrative that it is.
I think it's getting to the point now where, because people don't debate, because people don't do their own research, that it's very, very difficult for people more and more to make decisions now. If you look at my industry, that the people who succeed in the fitness industry are not always the best personal trainers. Now, of course, marketing and good branding and putting yourself out there in a good way, and you've got to compete with people on Instagram. Totally fair enough. But we'll see people that reality TV stars make more money through fitness without any qualifications than registered fitness professionals. It's because the fact that because of that, what you said about the learning things very, very quickly, that people don't do the research. People don't understand how to have nuanced conversation, don't understand pros and cons, that they take everything on face value more than I think ever before.
Yeah, and it's literally destroying the human consciousness. It's taken away our ability to do something that's so important that it's literally allowed us to create the civilization we have today. It's called critical thinking. If you're not able to critically think and evaluate information and process it and understand, separate bias, and be able to actually take that information and compound it, then it's going to be very difficult to actually be able to understand anything. So now instead of critically, like for example, like back in the day before this like advent of social media, right? We'd actually have to think about things because, like, for example, if we wanted to learn something, we'd have to actually like go and manually research it, watch a couple of videos, read a couple of books, and actually think about whether this process works. Now you just watch a YouTube short, and all of a sudden you're an expert. Like this takes away our ability to literally be cognitively active, and it's so bad. And the more you look at the way things are trending, it scares me, man. Like literally, it scares me. I talk to some people. That I just meet randomly, not related to coaching, and they just have no interest in anything. They have no interest in anything that has to do with any high cognitive ability. It's just they talk about Netflix, they talk about YouTube, they talk about like TV shows and things, things that you just absorb, but you don't synthesize. You're just absorbing it. And that's simple information.
I think it's almost encouraged as well, that sort of like not putting in the graft in our work, because if I want food, I order a delivery. If I want a show, I can bang on Netflix. I don't have to do any work in any other aspects of life that people don't understand. Getting them out of their comfort zone. We're in the world of participation awards at school for sporting events. People don't learn winners and losers. People don't learn hard work. And then when they see online, they come on and go. But before, if I was wanting to look up to somebody, if Dave down the road has a nicer car than me, I want to be like Dave. But now I have people. I can compare myself to Richard Branson. I compare myself to Jordan Peterson. I compare myself to insert person you admire here. And now we have this thing where you see people that if there's someone in the world that's done more than you in less time, you will find them on social media. And now you will directly compare what you have done and what you've achieved in your life to them, which either allows you to feel inadequate in your life and having the things that the life is built in the mundane. It's the boring, the nuance, it's day-to-day shit. It's learning to love those processes. But also it will encourage you to go, well, I need to catch up. So now you look for the quick fix. You now don't dedicate that time into your diary because it's, well, I need to play catch up here, rather than understanding, hey, this is, it's going to take 4 or 5 years and I'm happy and I want to embrace that. That's sort of gone.
It is totally gone. And that's exactly where I'm at right now. I want to be the best coach possible. I don't care how long it takes. I learn every day. I literally spend 2 hours a day learning and trying how to get better about different topics so I can actually discuss more. Otherwise I would just be telling you the same regurgitated, cliche stuff. But we're actually having a real conversation, which I love because this is like, it's not an everyday thing. It's awesome. And that's exactly it. Like social media, they didn't do proper research into neuroscience before launching it. And if they did, they didn't care about what it would do to humans. They didn't care that humans come inbuilt with a system in their brain called the mirror system. Have you heard of it?
No, I haven't. No.
So in our brain, our brains are very, there's different levels to our brain. There's the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain, and of course the cerebral cortex, which is higher level intelligence. The mirror system is a set of neurons built into our mammalian brain and extending into our cerebral cortex that allows us to mirror other people, right? So for example, when we coordinate and talk to other people, how like you might find your gesture changing to suit them if you agree, and if you disagree, you cross your arms, right? These are subconscious biases. But what social media didn't realize is that feeds into the subconscious mind, right? So when you show people images and perspectives of people that are living an amazing and probably illusionary life, you don't realize that it's building that subconscious bias into their mind to try and mirror the same actions without understanding the compounded process of time that has to occur between where they are now to where they need to be. So your mind thinks, okay, I can go and be like Richard Branson, I can be like Elon Musk, and I can buy this get rich quick scheme, or I can do this and that, and I can do this overnight because they did. But no, you're undercutting the amount of hard work. Elon Musk has owned PayPal. Elon Musk owns SpaceX. Elon Musk owns Tesla. Elon Musk was a failed entrepreneur many times. Jeff Bezos literally spent 20 years trying to launch Amazon. No one gave a damn about it. And now look at it, right? Steve Jobs, Apple was rejected by so many companies, right? But they don't understand that. People don't look into the background and the history. People are like, okay, if they can do it, I can do this if I buy this course and I just go and do this overnight and do some investments, right? But it's undercutting the entire process. So when you activate the mirror neuron system, you're activating similar actions, but you're undercutting the amount of risk, the amount of rejection, and the amount of thinking and experience that has to go into place to actually build something. A house is not built overnight, and neither is the foundations for your life. You have to work at it every single day.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to talk about that. And I think when you look at people overnight success, it often takes, like people say, it takes 5 to 10 years to become an overnight success. Right? We only see, certainly on social media, we only see people once they've become, way algorithms work on social media. People see content that is polished, edited, entertaining, and rightly so, right? Like it holds your attention. But the downside of those things is that people only see you once you've already made it. And don't get me wrong, so many people out there who have made it, in inverted commas, if you define what success is, which is so individual, will tell you that, I failed at this, it took me a long time, or it wasn't overnight success. But it's people look at that as like, that's easy to say when you're there. And when someone has had an element of success, because those people always are ambitious and looking forward, you tend to forget the difficulty and pain that was gone. I see it with people in dieting. They've got themselves in shape before, and they find it hard to do it a second time. And why is that? It should be easier. They know what they're doing. It's because they've got there. They've sort of forgotten how hard it was in the first place. And now they don't have that sort of kickstart because they need to be there again, because they never tick that box. At the same time, in terms of business, people are looking back and advising you from their mansion, tend to, they know it was difficult, but they forget how hard and what it actually felt like to be 10 years ago then. And I think sometimes it's really, really important, and this is something you had more pre-social media, of speaking to people in the early stages of this journey, finding out what the challenges are as they're going through them. We don't get that anymore. We see the polish, we see the end product. And I think that now everyone's comparing themselves to someone who is further in the journey to them. And even if they're the same age, it's like you don't know what they've sacrificed, what they've done to get to that moment. You can only focus on where you are and what you can do.
Absolutely, man. And like all of that leads to when you started with like what you said just then, is like comfort makes you weak, right? When you do it once and you've made it to the end. Like, say, for example, you have all this money, you build all this resource. Comfort makes you weak. If you lost it all again, could you do it again? Maybe, because you've got to have the hunger. You've got to have that burning desire. You've got to have it within to want to actually build something greater than yourself. And when you're super comfortable, like Conor McGregor is a perfect example of this, you lose the burning desire to actually go and achieve it again because you've already reached the top, right? And if you've already, like, say, for example, achieved that transformation, where's your desire to do it again? And first of all, why didn't you maintain it? Why didn't you maintain it? If you didn't maintain it, was it because you thought it would give you all this pleasure and realistically it didn't do any of that? It was just an illusion in your mind. Yeah. So at the end of the day, why can't you maintain it? And secondly, you don't have that desire to do it. So that desire can't be linked to a thing. It can't be linked to a body transformation. It can't be linked to like wealth or materials. It has to be linked to something more, Simon. And what that usually I find that link is actually providing value to the world, because that's the greatest thing that you can do in your life is actually provide for other people, not just for yourself.
I totally agree. And I think it's to say, it's, which we said earlier on about, at the start of this podcast, that abs are great, but it's what you do to achieve there that allows you to change the confidence. It's the pursuit of ticking that box. It's seeing that goal to completion. And I think it's also realizing, going back to the social media thing, we use the body composition thing as an example, that people look at people on social media who are good lighting, polished, airbrushed, maybe enhanced in terms of their supplementation stack they use, and they go, well, everyone men that I see that are taking the shows for social media are in really good shape. That's the way a man should look. Now, don't be wrong. I post on myself on my social media looking the best I've ever looked. I sit a little bit softer than that most of the year because I like a beer and I like a donut, like a pizza, like anyone else. But some people, if you want to go there, be all my guest. And if you want to stay there, you can do it 100%. But a lot of people assume that because social media says that that's the way someone should look, that's the way they should look. And realistically, most people fall in the spectrum between the extremes, and like find out where you're at. And when you realize where you actually want to be, like truly understand that's where you want to be. And if you want to push further to tick a box and achieve something, hit a bucket list moment and be ambitious, awesome. I think everyone should tick the box of a six pack once in a life. But don't be under illusions. If you're happy, a little bit softer, be okay with that. Because I see a lot of people that are truly, their words are, I want to do more, I want to do more, I want to do more. But their actions don't follow it. And I think their actions don't follow it because they actually are more comfortable than and they feel they should be more rather than they actually want to be more. And people don't tend to be present and enjoy where they actually are.
Hey, that's an amazing point you've made right there. It's actually, they think they should be more rather than they want to be more. And it's true, man. Like, if you think that you should be somewhere based on somebody else's expectation of you or based on your expectation of yourself, the famous saying goes, you don't fall to the level of your expectations, you fall to the level of your training. And it all comes down to your daily habits, your daily pursuit, not of greatness, but your daily pursuit of commitment towards your goal. And if, for example, like say, for example, you're talking about being happy, and literally just like living your life, that's okay as well. But at the same time, if that aligns with where you see your vision, that is fantastic. And if it's not, then you've got to ask yourself why. Okay, life is all about adjustment. Nothing is ever a straight path in life. If life was a straight path, we'd all be robots, right? It just doesn't work that way. Life is a twisty, windy road, and you've got to enjoy the journey because you're going to see a lot, do a lot, but also you've got to understand that your foundations have to be there. Otherwise, you'll reach the apex and fall back down again. Reach the apex, fall back down again. You've got to love the process, and most importantly, man, you got to love yourself.
Agreed. And then going back a little bit onto that specifically for guys, have you seen the last James Bond movie?
Skyfall?
No. No Time to Die. The one that came out last year.
No, I haven't.
Okay. I'll have to try and do this without spoiling it for you. But I left that watching that film. I'm a huge James Bond fan, like the biggest James Bond nerd you'll ever meet. And I left that movie incredibly angry with some of the decisions they made. And I looked at that and it almost changed my niche and my target market within my business, in that I see the trend in the way men's mental health is going in particular. And this sort of ties in with the cancel culture and the wokeness of today, with male role models in cinema and in life are being torn down. We see the not all men thing trending, which I think every woman on the planet should be safe. But if you look at the research for violent attacks on women, it's about 20% of men doing about 80% of the violence. And I feel that 80% of men that are involved in this, the good guys, would be willing to be supportive and want to help the cause of women, because I certainly do. I don't want to see anyone have some of the things that the women go through. But the all men can do better ethos that came out a couple of years ago, I think it discourages men that want to help. Men that are going, I want to support this, now feel like they're being attacked when they've not done anything. They're going, I'm not going to get involved in this. This is just, I know if I step in, if I say something wrong, I'm going to get slammed. I'm just going to stand back. Like with that, with the role models in cinema, and with just in general, more and more, like, I don't feel that a lot of people understand what it's to be a man anymore, because it feels like the societal things that made people a man, form their identity, are now being taken down one notch at a time. What's your thoughts on the mental health of men? Where do you see it going? And like, what's your take on some of the things in men's mental health in the last couple of years?
This is a great question, Simon. I feel very strongly about this. And I think that right now males have it harder than ever before, not because we, for example, live in a patriarchal society, as it's spoken about, but purely because now it seems like everything bad that happens is due to men. Like the majority of men, like civilized, educated men, don't want to hurt women. Like it's not even a concept. Like we just don't want to do it. But now, because as you were saying, at 20%, it literally just places a stigma upon males, saying that, okay, every male is like this. And then that cancel culture comes in, and now every male is a meathead. Every male, wants to hurt women. Every male is ill-educated. And this purely isn't the case. I mean, if you look throughout history, the majority of males in Senate, when in ancient Rome, men and women got to live equally, and men were in Senate. They used to debate about intellectual activities. They used to debate about scholars. They used to debate about tomes of wisdom, right? But now we're looking at men as though they're just in it to like try and get juiced up, go to the gym, and try and slay as many women as possible, which is the most like illogical Johnny Bravo concept that ever was. But now that's a generalist idea. We're placing a lot of generalist stereotypes without actually looking behind the root cause. A lot of males are actually depressed, and here's why. Because males are not allowed to be males anymore. We're not allowed to express our feelings. We're not allowed to actually be vulnerable because, one, we're sticking to the mindset of what a male is based on stereotypical males, right? So every male needs to be upright and, try and like hold up everything. But then on the other side of the divide, males are being torn down for being that exact same figurehead we're supposed to provide. Because how can you undo society norms, which has been around for the last, God knows, like 10,000 years, right? Where males provide for the family and the women nurture the children. This is literally built into our evolutionary scale. And now you're telling me all of that's bullshit because of cancel culture. Well, that leaves males without a place. And also because they're upholding their genetic knowledge. And then now they're being attacked for literally doing what their entire role in society has been throughout human history. So, of course, now you have the massive discrepancy of what you're supposed to be versus what you're not meant to be. And then now being a male is something that is undesirable. It's like being a male, you're a Chad, you're just trying to do all this to hurt women. You're just insensitive. But that's not the case. There's so many good men out there that literally want to do something better for the world, and they're being attacked for it. And Jordan Peterson, if you've ever watched Jordan Peterson stuff, he talks so much about feminism and he shuts it down every single time because it is nothing more. Well, actually, I don't want to say this, but I would say that he says that it is a cognitive bias.
I think there's so many things in this. I think we go back to like sound bites again, and that a lot of the arguments of sort of equality are ignoring evolution and psychological states, and everything now should be based equally around men and women based off purely equality alone, when that takes individuality away from every single one of those people. It ignores the fact that when we look at things like the gender pay gap, for sake of argument, which is often brought up. Now, if I think there's a legitimate argument for the gender pay gap, but not in the way that's being argued. And I think if we can move away from the sound bites and the rubbish arguments, we can actually focus on what is really important. I'll go into that in a second. But when we look at this, people go, men and women should be paid exactly the same. And they bring up these stats on averages, how men are paid differently than women overall. But a lot of this is the fact that psychologically men like stuff, women like people. So women tend to go into jobs that require those things. My partner is a teacher, and a very, very good teacher, and a lot of the people she works with are female. Obviously not all, but a lot of the people who teachers are female, right? The majority. Guys tend to like stuff. And it just happens to be that some of these jobs are more higher paying than others. You cannot compare someone who's building tech and brands and websites to someone who is a cleaner or a nurse or someone like that. Now, if women were in the same position in the same job, is it physically illegal to not pay them any differently? So that argument is completely non-existent, and it's only used if you use averages as a bias for what you are. And I think that creates a very, very interesting. The only difference, the only exception to that rule is in sport, where women are paid underpaid than men, which isn't right. But that's based on advertising and sponsorship. And when we get to a point where, when it's slowly closing, it doesn't happen overnight, where women have as many eyes on the sport as men do, and there's more sponsorship opportunities, that pay gap will even. But going back to it, it's more men like sport. So more men watch men's sport. And it takes away the fact that there's psychological differences between men and women that we can't ignore. I do think there is an argument for the gender pay gap in terms of male-dominated positions of power in careers often tend to promote more men than women. So even if they're paid the same one position, this person might have a better chance of being promoted. That's down to bad management. That is a genuine argument, but we don't talk about that. So this actual issue isn't being addressed because we're focused on the sound bites of things that people have, again, like Joe Rogan stuff, haven't done the research, haven't looked at it. And if we can just put that stuff aside, we can actually focus on the stuff that is a real issue in women's equality, and that stuff needs to be sorted.
Well, that's just human preference, right? Like that comes down to like really adjusting human preference. But let's look even. I completely agree with you, Simon. I think that yes, like the argument needs to be readjusted. We really need to look at what's happening on a preferential basis. But what if we dive even a little deeper than that, right? So, for example, you're saying some males in a higher position might pick other males to succeed them or get into a high position. But what if we are not looking based on gender? What if we're looking based on attributes? What if, well, we know that males are statistically quite good at dealing with high pressure scenarios. They have a more logical mindset and they're better at high paying. That's what Jordan Peterson talks about. He says males are better at high stress jobs. Males have always been under a lot of stress, especially like going back way into history. Males have always had the stress and the pressure of building society up, right? So like you gotta wonder like who's more suitable for the role. Is it because it's a gender thing, or is it because you're literally looking at someone who's able to actually perform the role they need? And I'm not saying that women can't, but I'm also saying, are we looking at that in the argument of the fact that maybe, would you hire a cleaner to be a CEO? Probably not.
And on the flip side,
way,
not to necessarily like demonize that women are cleaners and men are high pressure CEOs.
No, that's not what
I know that's not what you're saying. I know some incredible female CEOs and powerful, and there are massive exceptions to these rules and very, very good and very deserving women. And on the flip side of stuff, there was many things that if we're looking at averages here, which is always a bit dangerous, but if we are going to look at averages, there are things like we're saying men tend to be better at these stuff. There's stuff that's just women are just so much better at.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think going into, we were saying before, the men being providers, and like, again, this is the soundbite culture. Is like, just because something is one way, does that necessarily make it bad? Just because men are inherently providers doesn't necessarily mean that women can't be. And it's this thing of like, when was me wanting to provide, make more money to provide for me and my partner a bad thing? Me doing that doesn't take away from my partner's ability to make money and provide for me. She looks after me very, very well, and I'm very grateful. It's we have this world now where we want to challenge the status quo. Rather than, I think there's a phrase, I can't remember who said it, but it's a phrase I've used a lot. True equality is bringing more chairs to the table, not kicking the legs out from the chairs that are already there.
And that's the thing, we're trying to make everyone sit at the same table. And since when has that ever worked in the world? It's never worked. It's trying to make the world vanilla. Like let's put in a different example in terms of equality, right? So how they have athletics and they have sprinters, right? Why is it? And the reason I see it this way is because, well, I'm by trade a scientist. I'm a human biologist, a neuroscientist, and a biotechnologist. I've done all the academia in my life, Now I don't do that, but I used to. And the reason why male sprinters are always faster than female sprinters is not because they're males. The reason they're faster is because males have a streamlined anatomy. They have smaller hips and they have longer appendages. Females have wider hips for childbirth and it makes them slower. It creates air resistance, right? So therefore, they're all slower. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, why can't female sprinters be as good as male sprinters? What's the problem? Why can't they be on the same level? Well, because that's just not the way God intended it to be. And that's not to say that that's an elitist argument, but it's like, this is literally years, tens of thousands of years of human evolution have created where we are today. We've literally created this mindset within the last 20 years that everything needs to be different. But what about the last 10,000 years where everything was the way it was? How do you undo that so quickly? That's once again trying to rush a good thing. You need to take time to understand the foundations of your argument. Are you trying to push an agenda, or are you trying to create a positive, lasting impact? And for the record, I 100% think that women deserve more equality in everything they do. I 100% do. But I also want to point out that there are some ways in which it clearly isn't possible, such as the sprinting argument or in sports, because males are built different. It's just in their genetic code. It's scientifically the way it is.
I think as well, my biggest gripe with the feminism thing is not that women necessarily don't deserve more, is that I sometimes think the arguments and the things where we're going, the how way outlook's changing actually is more sexist than what they're trying to avoid. If we look at, say what we said before, that with the arguments that are coming out with the gender pay gap is taking away the individuality of what a woman wants. if a woman wants it, because another big thing about the pay gap is the fact that men don't take so much time off for childbirth, right? And
Yes.
the argument there is suggesting that women shouldn't want, not they shouldn't want to be mothers, but they should be in the pursuit of what is a successful women is being more in their career, not taking so much time off the job, and because the wage of over a year will go down if you take maternity leave, right? That shouldn't be considered a bad thing. And if you're a woman that doesn't want children and wants to be run multiple corporations, awesome, fine. I know many of those women; they're amazing. But it doesn't mean that the woman who decides to go, okay, I'm here, I'm happy, and I want to have a family, and I want to look after that family, isn't lesser. And we take away the individuality for what is a societal norm. And then if we go into sport, as you mentioned here, with this is the thing I have with the biggest issue in the way that I have with trans athletes coming into it. And it's a really hard topic because I've spoken about my views on trans athletes on another podcast I did. And it's a difficult one because where do they compete, right? These people want to compete. These people weren't happy in themselves. And you make the argument of I can't imagine the position where I don't feel comfortable in my own skin. And I do feel that, these people shouldn't be judged and should have support and all this sort of stuff. But my argument, other than safety, if you put a trans male, now female, into an MMA ring, things happen. But you have women, let's say using a sprinting argument, and you have a formerly male sprinter in the Olympics. You have women, we say that's now equality. But I would argue you now have women who have trained for decades to work hard to get into the Olympics, to potentially be in the running for the best woman on the planet at their given sport. They deserve to be there through tens of years of hard work and through something that they have no control over and now can't compete. And I know Laurel Hubbard, the example from the last Olympics, didn't do too well. And I don't think she deserved the hate on her that she got. It's her being allowed to compete that was the issue, not her herself. She just did what she wanted to do. I do think you could create one where that is more sexist. It's over putting women in roles that were male roles in cinema. Because why should it be a man's role? Why can't a woman play James Bond? Why can't a woman be a Ghostbuster? And I go, well, my argument, is it more sexist to say, well, you can't draw your own money, but don't worry, you can have our man's role and you can take over it. And, we'll give you an audience. As opposed to going, no, James Bond is a male character in this example, but we would love a female fucking badass to come over. Wonder Woman. That movie has done really, really well. Marvel is very good at this. They've created actually genuinely strong characters for women that stand on their own 2 feet, that draw money off their own merits. If that was the way the world done, that is the bringing chairs to the table argument. The taking male characters and making them female characters for equality, that's kicking the legs up from the chairs that already exist. That helps no one. That takes away male role models, and I think it's even more sexist to women.
And the impact of what you're saying in terms of competing in athletics and things like that, it's completely disregarding anatomy. Whether you're trans or you're not trans, it's disregarding the formation of your genetics, even before or after, right? Because like I was saying before, men and women have different body genetics. The way in which our hips are formed, our appendages, the way in which our bones can distribute strength, as you know, as a trainer, online trainer, we are completely different. You have to adjust different PT plans for males and for females. But this is now throwing all of that off the table and saying, okay, you're all the same. You just have to do the best you can, right? And that's okay, that's great. But realistically, that's completely unfair, and it is sexist because now you're making everyone else meet everyone else's standards, and now everything's uncertain. And then you bleed that into the younger generation. Could you imagine being a 5-year-old that wanted to be an athlete now, and you're telling them that they have to compete against someone that would be so difficult to compete against? Say for example, a 6'5" trans or whatever it is, right, at weightlifting. How on earth is that going to make them feel to look at that on TV and think wow, okay, my dream is kind of busted? Seriously, what does that do for children? What does it do for them to grow up and be uncertain on their place in the world, to be uncertain what they can do, what they can't do, what they can say, what they can't say? Where is the authenticity of humanity? And I think we're slowly blurring the lines, man.
Yeah.
We're blurring the lines. We don't know what it means to be human anymore. And I'm hoping to change that. But like seriously, it's a real thing, and that's creating all the mental health. Because right now, humans, it's actually very simple to be human, Simon. It's very simple to be human. It's realistically realizing that your position in the universe is not that different from everyone else's, right? If you think about it, we are literally individuals that are talking online. We're sitting on a little rock, which is literally a spaceship, which is like minuscule compared to the sun. Our solar system is minuscule compared to other solar systems. We are so small and insignificant, but we're grandiose, so eager to make ourselves different from each other, which literally makes no sense. It literally just creates a divide, and there's a problem with everything and anything. But realistically, if we could actually invert our minds to see how small we are and how much we need to help and support each other, this literally wouldn't even be a thing. Everyone would be keen to help each other, regardless if you're trans, you're straight, whatever it is. You'd be down to help each other, and you wouldn't have to compete to all be the same because you love each other for what you are.
I love that, and I think it's as much as we always tend to look at everything about what is the differences. Even in my industry, when people look at dieting, right, what's the difference between low carb and high carb and keto, and when we look at global views on people, we look at what's different. There's racism, there's sexism, there's biases, there's homophobia, and I'm like, we're all very, very, very similar. Regardless of what your sexual preference is, regardless of what your ethnicity is, like, who cares? And regardless of what your gender is, like, as I said, I think realizing how similar we are, allowing us to have, this sounds counterintuitive to what I just said, but it's not, like allowing us to have our own individuality rather than dictating where we should be, I think people will be a lot happier. I think there'll be a lot less sexism if we had this societal norms of how a man should be and how a woman should be. And understanding there are differences. Like some people, men have general preferences in terms of where they go, in terms of careers they choose and actions they have and things that they do and role models they look up to. Embrace that, because that is just something that is market research you're never going to get from a survey. But at the same time, just because a man is that way does not mean that it's offensive to somebody else. And if someone doesn't fit that societal norm, we have an incredible, powerful, assertive female CEO that runs multiple businesses. That should be celebrated in the same way that a man who wants to have a simple job, just take his paycheck, go home and look after his kids and be a live-at-home dad, should also be celebrated. These things aren't. I think there's a way of tying a bow on this in terms of the counterculture work left. It's like understanding that it's okay to be different in your views or in your actions or in your ideals. And now we are bombarded with shoulds. We should view things this way. We should do this. We should have this opinion. We should act this way. We should want this job. And
it's all about the seeds being planted, especially when we're all young, we're susceptible. See, this is the thing about generational trauma. And the reason why when we talk about this societal norm, it's not like the government promotes it. It's not like, it's promoted. What it is, it's generational seeds. So whatever our parents, our grandparents, their parents, they planted into us when we're susceptible from the age of 0 to 7, and it works its way into our psychology, into our subconscious mind. So therefore, when we go around the world and we talk about they and this, we don't really know the source of it, but the source of it comes from the storytelling we hear when we're young that plants the seeds of what we should believe in. So a lot of the time, I meet a lot of people that aren't really clear on their beliefs, their values, their morals, or their ethics. They have no idea what they think about. They just know that what they're told to be and what they should be. And that's a real problem because we're all in this together. We're all in this together on this one spaceship hurtling through time and space. And yet, if we keep separating each other from our visions, we keep separating each other from our mindset, and based on the fact of like simple physical things, then it's really hard for us to really move forward as a species. In fact, I would say, unless we learn to work together as a species, we're going to die out. Because we're going to use all the resources, we're going to undercut all of each other. And that dream of going to Mars and building a happy colony, how's that going to happen if we can't even make a happy home here? Right? Why not literally? How do we prosper as a species any further than where we are? Is this the end of us? Because if we can't all agree to be on the same page, well, we're going to die out. That's just, that's going to happen.
Do you follow Chris Williamson? Modern Wisdom?
No.
You should definitely look at him, especially for what you're talking about in terms of the millennials. He's a guy that's on Love Island UK. Started a business making sort of like doing club promotion and things like this, and now he runs a podcast called Modern Wisdom. And it's, I would say he's going to become the next Jordan Peterson. Like he's younger, he's probably about my age, and he's had Jordan Peterson on for a 3-hour show recently on his show. And he's really good for if you're liking the millennial talk and that sort of stuff. You really like it. He talks about something called the menopause, that when people kind of hit 30, they tend to have their big change in priority and they feel a bit lost, in the same way that everyone in their 20s start bodybuilding, and at 30 they all start doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, because what was important to them 5 years ago isn't now. But he had a 3-hour interview with Jordan Peterson on that's just gone live on his YouTube channel. And he talks about exactly that, in that he feels that the population is going to peak soon and it's going to come down because we're pushing people to have less children and, you know, and be more divided. And he generally thinks that things are going to go down in that way. So I think it's interesting that you brought that up. So going on to some closing questions. First off, another podcast recommendation. You know, a few from here. Do you know, you ever heard of Stephen Bartlett?
No.
So he's, I don't actually know the business he ran, but he's the youngest ever person on Dragon's Den, the equivalent of Shark Tank in the UK. Multi-millionaire. He started a podcast, very similar, called The Diary of a CEO. And he talks to very rich people. And I stole, with love and respect, a question, one of his closing questions, where he gets people to ask a question to the next guest. I'm going to ask you that in a second. So a question that I'm going to ask my next guest. But the question I have for you, from a guy that I interviewed yesterday called Paul Standel, who's a personal trainer and does a lot of work for confidence on camera. He asked you, how would you go about defining the limits of mindset work for someone that has depression? Where is the line between what they need to do, when they need to do the work, and when they need professional help?
Right, that's an awesome question. And you know, depression is multifactorial. Depression, if you look at it on a neurochemistry level, comes from the inability for your brain to secrete dopamine and actually receive that dopamine, right? And also for serotonin at the same time as well, SSRIs. Now, if you look at it even further, right, let's look at your daily activities, okay? If you're staying inside, you're just lying down in bed, you're just watching TV, are you giving yourself a shot? Are you actually going outside? Are you actually getting fresh air? Are you doing basic things that build your vitality? That's number one. If you are and you're still feeling depressed, okay, then I think you need to find some real help. If you really find yourself in a deep, dark black hole and you really can't get out and it's honestly just really bad, you need help, 100%. But if you're just feeling sad and you're not sure if it's clinical depression or if it's literally just feeling a bit down because maybe, you know, you've had too much to drink or you've not been looking after your health or you're feeling burned out, you got to get really clear on the distinction, because maybe taking a holiday might bring you back up. But if you do all of that and every day still feels like it is the worst day ever, then you're going to need to get some clinical intervention. But I do not advocate antidepressants. I don't advocate them. In fact, it's something I feel so strongly about. It's one of the reasons I became a life coach.
Why not?
Because antidepressants over time, they fray your neurotransmitters. Okay, so there's different types of antidepressants. Some target dopamine receptors, most target serotonin receptors, right? And how the brain works in terms of neurochemistry is at the end of every neuron is something called an axon, okay? And at the end of the axon is where you release neurotransmitters. And in this case, it might be serotonin or dopamine, and it will go across the axon to the other side where it will be picked up by the dendrite head, and that's going to propagate an action potential, just basic neurochemistry, okay? Neuroscience. So when you take antidepressants, what it does is it blocks your ability to, one, produce the neurotransmitter, and two, to receive it, meaning you have no activity, right? And what this does is it has a great effect on your amygdala because you don't produce emotions. It's stopping you from producing emotions. And the whole thing about being human, man, something that I realized from doing this for 9 years when I was addicted to drugs, was I was trying to not feel. I was trying to not feel because I felt so bad about my life. I was trying not to feel. And I'll tell you what, it is the worst thing you can do to avoid feeling, because sure, feelings are not always going to be happy. You can't always be happy. It's not realistic. You can't always be sad. That's not realistic either. But you've got to experience the full spectrum, because being human means actually being able to feel and being vulnerable. That's part of being human. We're not meant to be perfect. We're not meant to be a certain model. We're not meant to be happy all the time. That's an illusion, okay? No one's meant to be happy all the time. In fact, that's just like realistically impossible. But what you need to have is a baseline, and that's where your training comes in, right? But say, for example, if you start taking antidepressants, that's permanent damage. A lot of the time, I've had friends in the past who've taken antidepressants. They've had massive weight gain. They've had dysregulatory functions. They don't know how to feel and express. They feel dead on the inside. You don't feel sad anymore, but you don't feel happy either. And I don't think anyone should live like that, man. So for
I
me, I feel
agree.
very strongly against it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think some of the having exposure, like, you know, my partner's got OCD and she's done a fair bit of cognitive behavior therapy. And I think exposure to things that make you stressed is one of the is a way of getting over an emotion, sadness, or the power sadness has on you, or anxiety, or whatever else. It starts with starting to learn that, like, okay, this is normal. I'm okay to have this emotion. And I've got to, like, it doesn't make this good, but it makes it like I can react better to it. I can handle it better. I can start to build past it. And if you never feel that stuff, you don't get any better at dealing with it. You have to experience it. The same thing we spoke about at the start, getting on the scale. If I have an emotional connection to the scale, if I never step on it and I ignore it, do I ever get a better relationship, or I just put it out of my head? If I get on it every day and go, oh, I've gone up because of this, I've gone over this, then eventually you don't have an emotional connection. It's just, it's a number. Eventually, like, when you start to experience sadness, I had a podcast with a guy called Pat Davidson. Well worth looking out, certainly for the end part of this. I asked him a question about pulling out of mental health. He's a personal trainer, but he went a lot into his addiction with alcohol and went in a very different way than I thought. And he had this analogy of, like, going around a mountain, that there will be shadowy parts of this mountain. But the more you go around it, the more you know when you kind of hit those shadowy parts, like, okay, there's a light bit around the corner. But the first time you hit that shadowy part, you don't know if it's going to end. And, like, that's exactly the same view I have on certain antidepressants. That it's like if you're numbing things, you just don't you don't actually realize and learn how to deal with the shadowy side of the mountain.
And that's the whole part of life coaching as well. It's called shadow work. I did a lot of research into I don't know if you've heard about shadow work. Have you?
No.
It's a whole area of, like, coaching, and it's not so much based on, like, facts and statistics, but it's based on understanding your shadow, because every human being comes with a duality. We come with a yin and a yang, right? And a lot of us just look at the light and we think, okay, because everything, we always need to be happy, and if you're not happy, there's something wrong with you, right? That's a myth that has been created by the pharmaceutical industry. It is not true. If you're not happy, there's nothing wrong with you. You just need to figure out what it is that's making you upset. It's not you have to be happy all the time. So shadow work is about getting really clear on what it is you're trying to repress, because repression leads to sabotage. So, for example, in terms of the scale, right, if you're afraid of the scale and you keep repressing your ability to stand on that scale, then you're trying to step away from the fact that you might be afraid of the person that was unhealthy and fit in the past. You're trying to push that down. You're trying to quash it. You're trying to ignore it. And that's not healthy, because if you're not aware of the things that you were and you're not accepting that, then you sabotage yourself in cycles. So shadow work allows you to get clear on what you're afraid of, why you're choosing to ignore it, and trying to disown it. Yeah. You don't want to disown parts of your psychology. You want to accept yourself as a whole, because when you do, that's when you can really prosper. You've got to accept yourself for your good and your bad.
I love the fact that you said it's a myth created by the pharmaceutical industry, because it's certainly a thing that today that we expect us all to be happy. And we see people, going back to social media, we see people's highlight reel. We see the good days. We see the good moments. And as much as I don't want everyone to start showing all the negative bits, I like people being vulnerable on social media and having this, but we're all going to do it, right? I'm not going to show, if I wake up the day tomorrow and I feel really, really ugly and having a fat day, I'm not going to take photos of it, right? That's nature, that's human nature, that's natural. But at the same time, we need to be able to remove ourselves from the fact that what we see online is people's highlight reel. We can't look at that and go, wow, he looks like he's having a great life. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And this thought that we should always have this great, exciting, happy life is unrealistic. When you realize that, as I said earlier, life is built on the mundane. Yeah, you'll have some days that are mega, mega exciting that you remember. But most of the days you wake up are going to be days where I go to work, I do something I did yesterday, I'd answer some emails and make some calls. And if you can't learn to be happy in those moments, you're going to be very miserable in between, because you're waiting for that next high. It's that dopamine kick, as opposed to going like, I quite like just sitting and just doing my work. I quite like going out and having a walk. Like, these mundane things, if you can enjoy that, you'll enjoy the rest of life.
Exactly right. How you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yeah. So going into, again, we had that first closing question, but just like, tell us a little bit more about your coaching, what you do, and sort of your mind access method?
Yeah, so the Mind Access method, Simon, involves 5 coaching programs. And depending on which client comes to me, I always give a discovery call, right? I always want to find out more about you. And this is completely free, but I need to learn about how I can help you best. And if I can't help you, then I'm going to tell you. But if I feel I can help you, then I'll discuss my coaching program. So the Mind Access method involves the Purpose Insight, which is a coaching program that has 14 coaching sessions and it's really in depth. And this is basically everything we've talked about. It's discovering your vision, getting clear on what's holding you back, getting really clear on what your self-image is like and how you can change your mindset and the way we should interact with other people's to actually achieve your goals with a strategy, right? It's very comprehensive. It is a complete personal transformation. I've seen my clients go through this and man, it's been awesome to watch it happen, right? It's been great to see people create the life they want. The next one is the beliefs breakthrough. Maybe you're clear in your vision, but you are just so afraid to go and take action to do it. This is 11 coaching sessions. We go deep into what holds you down. We go deep into your self-esteem, build up your mindset, create a strategy to help you achieve it. So this is awesome for overcoming fears. Then there's the mindset maximizer. It's basically about finding out how you think, right? So say, for example, you know what you want, you're aware of your fears, but you can't actually action it. You just stop yourself, you sabotage yourself. Comes a lot to what we talked about in terms of self-sabotage. We get really clear so you're self-aware of your triggers, we understand your habits and rewire your mindset so that you stop sabotaging yourself and you reconcile with the shadow and you plan out goals to achieve this too. This is 9 coaching sessions. The confidence creator, which is basically 7 coaching sessions, it's all about building you up. It's all about building you up to face the world so that you can have better relationships, understand your belief system, change your mindset so you can interact better with other people and get the life you want because your network is your net worth. And how you build relationships with one person is how you build it with everyone, right? You have to learn to be personable and have the confidence to do it. And finally, we have the goal setter, which is where, say, for example, you just want to understand how to achieve your goals. I'm really good at goal strategy and I love taking my clients through this. It's 4 coaching sessions. We get extremely clear in your vision and then put that in a really concise strategy with the pillars we discussed to help you go out and achieve it. And of course, I have ongoing strategy sessions, weekly or fortnightly. If you finish a program, I'm still there. In fact, you can communicate with me anytime. I love keeping in touch with all my clients. But also, if you want to have sessions, I'm always there. And we can have it weekly or fortnightly. And we go through your challenges and look at your goals to make sure you're on track. So that's everything I do. That is the Mind Access method. And that's how I help my clients achieve their personal transformation.
Awesome. So before we go into my final closing questions, I like to have a couple of questions after this one, and you've tied into it nicely with your coaching methodology. Tell us where people can find you.
You can find me all over the internet. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn. On Facebook and Instagram, I'm known as Mind Access Life Coaching. And on LinkedIn, it's just my name, Geoff Seow. You can find my website, mindaccesslifecoaching.com.au. I have on my Instagram a link tree that leads to all of the podcasts that I've been on. There's a whole bunch of free resources I give away on my website. I give away as much value as possible for free just because I love doing that. I have a book that you can get for free. It's called The Visionary. It's a step-by-step guide to help you get clear in your life vision. And once you read the book, you'll know what you need to do. It's literally a plan I've built for you. I've done free webinars, which I give away on my website. I've also got heaps of, I've got a service brochure. I've just built as many channels as possible, Simon. I love giving out value to the world, so it makes me happy to do so. So you can find that on my website, find that on my social media, or that's pretty much where you're going to be able to find me.
Awesome. Cool. So going on to our closing questions. Now, this is something that I think that, and you've mentioned a few people already of that you follow. I think that everyone that's achieved that element of success or fulfillment in life always stand on the shoulders of other people, on shoulders of giants. And I used to ask this question as a follow-up to the podcast, but I actually like doing it live on air because I think every now and again you'll get someone who have a lot of ums and ahs because they were caught off guard with this question. But generally it allows people to talk about the people that inspired them, which I think is always good to have good conversation. So if I was to close this episode and I was going to reach out to another person to be on this show, who would you recommend I reach out to and why? You can be as big or as small as you like.
Okay, there is a person that I did a podcast with a little while ago. I think it was like maybe 2 months ago or a month ago. And he lives in Sweden and is this guy called Elvis. And you remind me a lot of
Elvis.
Simon. His name is Elvis, like the singer Elvis, right? His name is Elvis Tedlanek. He has his own podcast called The Life of Elvis. And we talked about a whole spectrum of things the same way you and I did today. And I love these kind of podcasts because we talk about more than just, certain aspects. We talk about everything. And if I were to recommend someone else to do a podcast with and to reach out with, it would be him because he's got an open mind and he's very intellectual. So
awesome. What's his surname?
Elvis Tedlanek.
How do I spell that?
Tadlanek.
Okay, cool. I might actually send me that a little bit later on. But yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
And then last couple. So again, for the exact same thing, I want to have this podcast a platform for people to learn and like about various topics. And also to help, the people I speak to are all often people that want to learn themselves. So I want them to be able to speak to people. And as we had for my last guest and telling about a question for you, I'm going to ask you the same question. I do actually know who my next guest is. Sometimes we don't. But in this time, I have a guy who's talking about breath work, the Wim Hof method, and ice therapy. Is there a question that you want to know about those topics or about him that I can ask him my next guest?
That's a very interesting guest because I love Wim Hof. And I guess I want to know is if he has been doing the Wim Hof method, the breath work for a very long time, I would love to know what he has seen change in his physiology, in his mindset, in his blood work, and his fitness capability. And I would also love to know in the Wim Hof method, when in between round 1, 2, and 3, you actually hold your breath for a minute and a half, and then a minute and 2 minutes. I would love to know what he visualizes during those times of silence, because I personally go into a whole nother world when I do Wim Hof breathing.
So what he visualizes in the times of silence during breath work. And then you said what change he's noticed in his mindset, blood work, physiology, psychology. Was there anything else that you mentioned there?
And just general fitness.
And fitness. Cool. I will definitely ask that on Tuesday. So lastly, what are you most grateful for right now?
I am most grateful for God. I'm most grateful to God for giving me life, giving me the opportunity to do the things I do, giving me the opportunity to speak to you, someone who lives on the other side of the world, and we're chatting on Zoom. I'm grateful for everything I have because I didn't necessarily do anything to deserve it. I worked the whole time. And I'm not saying that I didn't put in the actions, but who knows how it could have panned out. So all I'm saying is I'm grateful to God because whether I put in the actions or I didn't, I'm here now, I'm chatting to you, and this is an opportunity. So I'm grateful to the above. And that's what I can say. But I'm not religious. I just believe in God. That's what I'm trying to say.
That's awesome, mate. Anyway, thank you so much. It's been a really, really interesting topic. I think we've covered a lot of good stuff there. I really appreciate you coming on.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Simon. It's been awesome.
Always, man. Anytime.